Our core community app. Through 5th graders, 22nd from 6 to 8 o'clock p.m. Have fun, food, and games, so grab a friend and get registered. You can find in the app. Keisha at My Core Nation. The 8th will be hosting men's gym nights at the community center at 7 o'clock. Again, those dates are February the 18th. Join us for our third and trivia will start at some fun prizes for the winners. Our monthly core community book club is happening on the next book is Let the Ghosts Speak by Brian Davis. The meeting is happening March the 4th. We'll be kicking and get some community family and a fun chance to win a cool trophy. Lots of different things coming up here at the core. We hope you will come on out and join us for some of these events.
Go before make sure you're in the heaven free pass on your door. If you want to take a moment, turn around and say hello. 4th grade, and you're going next door, you can head back to, I think Lexi might be back, and they'll make sure you get next door. People on the side, so. Snow, I never saw a car upside down. It rained upside down. What's that? That's a skill to get your car upside down, and it's all the time. A couple other things as we continue. Number one, this is all of our plowing out here, gets everything done just this winter. And so if you look out there, it looks like a snowman. Make sure you say thank you to Rob for making sure that everything's clear there and our parking lot's good to go. It's a good way to get to know people, hang out together, have some. And I thought that would be much better anyway. We'd be much closer. We have easier access. And then the other thing is this. We are looking, we have been leasing for, I think, above the state bank building for offices so that we have more room in here during the week. We were able to get when we first for that. And we talked to the bank. We're going to own offices up here. And so that's kind of a possibility of what we're going to do next. If you know of anybody that could use some 100 square feet, there's a conference room, there's a big lot. You know somebody, we're looking to get out of that as we'll just kind of out it. Today, we're going to continue on in our series of What is Marriage. I want to give you a PG-13 here this morning. You're not comfortable if you're next door at the kids' stuff. So last week, we discussed how modern society has strayed from a biblical understanding of God's design for marriage. We talked about as being something where we see how God as a fundamental modeling of God with his, not just something that culture came up with or some kind of a legal construct. Marriage is designed by God. I'm going to be taking seconds to sip every once. I'm about to cough, so I want to thank everybody who bears with me being sick. An unimaginable drugs on you that you gave me for the many witchcraft and voodoo solutions I was given. I heard people give me so much advice for putting in a box to stop. Telling people my feet aren't coughing. It's not, but I kept. If I'm sipping of source code in a video game, that while humans can it, they can't basic design of the creator. We need to recommit to relationships, or if you're being called by God to focus exclusively, there's a couple of reasons not to get married. Now, because it is so contrary to modern things, talk about God's design for marriage did, all right? When God said, look, you're not intended for that there was no intention of that being broken. It's a very foreign thing to them, just like it's a very foreign thing to us. And so in Matthew 19:10, the disciples say this after Jesus talks about Jesus then said to him, if this is the case, it is better not to marry. They go, if God's design is what we have to stick of our own ways of doing this, why would anyone ever want to get married? So let's begin. Why would anyone want to said, getting married. But I want to talk about that idea of a suitable helper. By definition, a biblical suitable they aren't suitable if don't team up with those who are unbelievers. How can righteousness be a partner with wickedness? How can light live with darkness? This is something we don't say much in the church anymore, but it is a biblical concept. Christians, we are not to marry Christians. That is very clear. Us with people for God, no matter how much you can change them. Other translations say, don't be unequally yoked. That was an analogy that the farmer would have understood. If you yoke a trained ox with a strong ox with a weak them was going to end up getting hurt. You would want to get married to a suitable helper in serving God, but that does limit Christians to marry other Christians. Otherwise, those in the church in Corinth, because they were wrestling in a culture that was kind of like ours, extremely sexually, more so than ours. Part of the worship of their gods involved sex with prostitutes. Some might have felt that sex, potentially even in marriage, was sexual. In light of some implications of what that was about, Paul here could be saying it is okay not to get married. Or as we talked last week, it's not bad to stay single. Answer a call to in that way. Paul talks about the God-given gift of celibacy in this chapter. Look at verse 7 of chapter 7. He says, but I wish everyone were single just as I am, yet each person has a special gift from God of one kind or another. If you have been given the gift of celibacy, it's a sin. This. Because there is so much sexuality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman should have her own husband. That's pretty cool. Because the culture, is it wrong to choose not to have sex? Because our culture sex outside God's design? Throughout the chapter, Paul affirms marriage sinful. It is a good and it is a godly thing. And while he recommends celibacy for those who can handle it, he is not. In fact, he stresses that marriage is essential to those who are sexually tempted. The balance of this view. I often advise people to have very short, very long periods of time. It is better to have a quick, and I think that's because we don't take it seriously. Worse to get married quickly than to have sex before. I can't tell you how many times I've heard parents less concerned that their kids are having sex outside marriage than they are that they might get married too quickly. For Christians, I don't think that is biblically at all. Marriage without sinning. Without sinning. So, to get married if you can't avoid sexual sin. Another reason the Bible says we should desire to get married is to have kids. Malachi 2, or Malachi, if you prefer. Verses 3 through 5. Children are a gift from the Lord. Children born to a young man are like arrows in a warrior's hands. How joyful is the man whose quiver is full of them. He will not be put to shame, in which you may find yourself a single parent. God mom. And if for various reasons a child is left parentless, God is sensitive to that situation. God is called the Father of this, and we as his church, particularly James chapter 1:27 says this: in the sight of God the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. We are to take care of the situations when it's not ideal. And although it's not bad to remain single for certain reasons, God design for marriage is, we have obviously not followed them, okay? Week. 87%, and the last stats I saw, 87%, and it's not much different outside the church, 87% not divorce or through having sex before marriage. And it's really tough. In fact, 100% of us have not. Look at how God calls us to handle situations in which we haven't followed his. Several distortions of marriage. Distortion we get of God's design for marriage. In Genesis 4:19, here's what it says. Married two women. The first, the second was Zillah. In the Old Testament, we certainly see polygamy as increasingly practiced, always problematic, causes all kinds of issues. We just are supposed to model God's relationship with us. And when Israel follows other gods, they are referred to as betraying God and becoming terrorists. God expected the same of his relationships. They had all these relationships that a man could have with a woman, but it's really interesting. When a man had multiple wives, they were still, as he did with divorce, regulated the sin to prevent. So, at some point in your life, you realize I'm only supposed to have one man's wife. If there isn't permitted to just pick one and dump the others, all right, make things right. So I'm just getting these two. I'm just going to say, this is my wife. How God worked out to deal with their. Exodus 21:10-11 says this: slave wife takes another wife, the first wife, to food, intimacy. If he fails in any of these three obligations, free woman without making any payment. One, not the other, and times monogamy to the vast common practice of the Jews and later Christians. That tells us they knew the design. They just weren't following it. They knew what was like God's relationship with Israel. It was the same full. Distortion of marriage, see. Reality is a distortion of God's design. Now, it's cold outside, but it's here, all right? This one is so out of touch with where our culture is right now, and is so out of touch with where our culture is right now, it makes us nervous to even talk about it. It makes us nervous to even talk about it. But we see clearly in logical design, more email when I talk about specific reasons we've talked about. Those reasons are tough. It leads to more STDs, higher rates of substance abuse. Research about the life expectancy of those who participate